My name is George. I'm 75 years old, and I've spent most of my life listening to stories of people God has marked with a greater purpose. Today I'm going to share Helena's story, a woman I met at a retreat 2 years ago, when she was 89 years old. Her story carries urgent lessons for all of us who have been chosen. Helena always knew she was different. Since childhood, she would wake up every early morning between 3 and 4 a.m. It wasn't insomnia. It was an inexplicable connection with the divine. In those silent hours, when the world slept, she felt God's presence intensely, as if the veil between the natural and supernatural became thinner. First mark of the chosen. You wake up when the spiritual world is most active. If this happens to you, it's no accident. It's God calling you to a level of communion that most don't experience. Those hours aren't for you to toss and turn frustrated. They're your call to vigilance, intercession, and deep communion. Helena also had dreams that became reality. She dreamed of her grandmother's death 3 days before it happened. She dreamed her friend was pregnant before she herself discovered it. In her youth, this frightened her. She didn't understand why she saw things before they happened. Only later did she comprehend. God was preparing her heart, revealing that she carried a different spiritual burden. Second mark of the chosen. Your dreams are prophetic portals. When you repeatedly dream about someone, when you see events before they happen, when you wake up with certainties about situations that haven't yet manifested. This isn't imagination. It's God using your spiritual sensitivity as radar. The problem isn't having these dreams. The problem is ignoring them. And there was more. Helena felt others' pain as if it were her own. She'd see a tragedy on TV and experience physical anguish in her chest. As a child, she'd cry for people she didn't even know. Her parents didn't understand why she cared so much about strangers. But she couldn't help it. It was as if the world's suffering echoed inside her. Third mark of the chosen. Your empathy transcends natural limits. This ability to feel others' pain, even from a distance, isn't weakness. It's divine design. You were designed to be an intercessor, someone who carries others' burdens before God. Your heart that weeps for strangers is a heart that reflects Christ's own compassion. Don't suppress this. Channel this sensitivity into prayer and action. Animals also responded differently to Helena. Dogs that barked at everyone would instantly calm down near her. Skittish cats would come lie in her lap. Birds would land on her window. It wasn't coincidence. Animals have the ability to perceive energy fields and spiritual presences that humans ignore. Fourth mark of the chosen. Creatures recognize your anointing. Animals aren't fooled by social masks or appearances. They sense spiritual authenticity. If animals approach you with inexplicable trust, it's because they detect something beyond the physical. A peace, a light, a presence that emanates from those who walk close to God. And people. People always came to Helena. Strangers in the supermarket line would start pouring out their deepest problems. People she'd just met would open up about their secret pains. She radiated a calm presence, a refuge. Even without words, her simple presence brought relief. Fifth mark of the chosen. You attract wounded souls. It's no accident that broken people gravitate toward you. God positioned you as a lighthouse. Your spiritual aura functions as a magnet for those who are lost, desperate, hurt. This can be exhausting, but it's purposeful. You were set apart to be a bridge between heaven and earth, between human pain and divine healing. Helena also experienced inexplicable physical sensations. Strong pressure between her eyebrows, tingling in her hands when praying for someone, heat in her chest when near an intense spiritual presence. These manifestations weren't madness. They were confirmations of her amplified sensitivity to invisible realities. Sixth mark of the chosen. Your body responds to the spiritual. When you feel tingling, heat, pressure, goosebumps during moments of prayer or worship, your body is reacting to spiritual frequencies. You're not making it up. You're perceiving dimensions that others don't capture. These sensations are signals that you're tuned into a channel most don't access. And there were rare but powerful moments when Helena simply knew things, without a shadow of doubt, without being able to explain. It was as if, for an instant, she could see beyond the veil and perceive the absolute truth about a situation. In these moments, doubt was impossible. It was God whispering certainties directly to her spirit. Seventh mark of the chosen. You have moments of supernatural knowledge, when you simply know something without having a way to know it, when certainty comes without logic, but with absolute force, when your intuition screams louder than your reason. This is God's Spirit, operating through your elevated sensitivity. Trust these moments. They are divine compass. But here's what Helena discovered over her 89 years. Having all these marks, carrying all these signs of the chosen, means nothing if you don't act according to them. Fundamental lesson. Gifts without obedience are buried talents. And this is exactly where Helena failed. And this is where most of the chosen fail. It was June 1967, a Thursday. Helena was preparing dinner, organizing details for her son Miguel's 10th birthday. Married for 12 years to Daniel, a hard-working construction man, fast-paced life, accumulated responsibilities. That dawn, Helena woke up at 3:47 a.m., as always. But this time something was different. She felt a tightness in her chest, that type of pressure she had learned to recognize as a spiritual warning. Something was profoundly wrong. She didn't know what, but she knew. God was trying to warn her. But she did what most of the chosen do. She rationalized. She told herself it was just anxiety, that she had many worries, that she needed to sleep to face the next day. She ignored the spiritual alarm and went back to sleep. Lesson for the chosen. Rationalizing spiritual signals is rebellion disguised as logic. When you explain your gifts with psychology, when you justify your warnings with stress, when you convince yourself that tightness in your chest is just natural worry, you're silencing God's voice. The chosen need to learn to distinguish between human anxiety and divine alarm, and Helena knew the difference, but she chose to ignore it. In the morning, Daniel left for work. Helena was upset with him over a silly argument about money the night before. When he tried to kiss her goodbye, she turned her face away. Pride, hurt, rush, the excuses we use to deny love. And in that moment, the tightness returned, stronger. It was as if something inside her screamed, "Don't let him leave like this. Ask forgiveness. Hug him. Say you love him." But she had tasks. She needed to take Miguel to school, had a shift at the hospital. The spiritual impulse was suffocated by the agenda. She convinced herself she'd talk to Daniel later, that she'd resolve everything when he returned. He didn't return. Construction accident. Loose beam. Instant death. And Helena sat in the empty kitchen, realizing with devastating horror that God had shouted two clear warnings, once at 3:47 in the morning, again when Daniel was leaving. And she ignored both. Brutal lesson for the chosen. Your gifts come with doubled responsibility. To whom much is given, much will be required. Luke 12:48 leaves no room for doubt. If you have the ability to feel warnings others don't feel, if your dreams reveal what's to come, if your spirit detects dangers before they manifest, ignoring these signs isn't a simple mistake. It's conscious disobedience. Helena had seen in dreams, felt in her body, received certainty in her spirit, but she chose rush instead of presence, chose task instead of relationship, chose agenda instead of love. And this cost the last conversation with her husband, cost the chance for forgiveness, cost the words that could never again be said. That night, kneeling beside the empty bed, Helena made a vow before God. She promised she would never again ignore the warnings. She promised she would live according to her gifts. She promised that when she felt that tightness, that certainty, that 3 a.m. call, she would obey without questioning. And then came the most painful part of Helena's story. She broke that vow repeatedly over the following decades. In the first months, she really changed. When she woke at dawn, she'd pray until she felt peace. When she had a dream about someone, she'd contact them immediately. When she felt an impulse to hug someone, she'd hug without thinking twice. But then life returned to normal. Routine swallowed intentions, commitments suffocated sensitivity, and the gifts returned to being treated as curiosities instead of commands. Devastating lesson. Tragedy doesn't change you permanently, only temporarily. Matthew 26:41 warns us, "Watch and pray, because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." The chosen's problem isn't not knowing what to do, it's not continuing to do it after the initial pain passes. You will forget. You'll normalize again. You'll return to explaining your gifts rationally. You'll postpone obediences. And this progressive forgetting, this slow return to spiritual complacency, this is the true tragedy of those who were marked. Helena remarried in 1972. Antonio, history teacher, patient, and kind man. They had 35 years together before a stroke took him in 2007. And in those 35 years, Helena swore it would be different. That she'd use her gifts to be a better wife, more present, more attentive to divine warnings about her marriage. But it happened again. She returned to ignoring the signs. There were nights when she woke at 3 a.m. with Antonio heavy on her heart. Something clearly said, "Go there, hug him, tell him you love him." But she thought, "He's sleeping. Tomorrow I'll show affection." There were days when she felt that familiar tightness in her chest, and the impulse was crystal clear. Cancel your commitments today. Stay with him. This time matters more. But she responded to her own conscience. I have responsibilities. I can't simply drop everything for a feeling. Lesson for the chosen. Your spiritual impulses are not just feelings. They are divine orders disguised as intuition. When you feel that impulse to call someone, it's not random. When you wake with a specific person on your heart, it's not coincidence. When your spirit pushes you toward an action that seems inconvenient, it's not your imagination. God uses your amplified sensitivity as a direct communication system. Your impulses are celestial telegrams, and treating them as mere feelings is wasting the channel God specifically established with you. Helena confessed to me that her greatest regret of those 35 years wasn't the argument she had with Antonio. It wasn't the disagreements about money or how to raise children. Her greatest regret was all those ordinary Wednesdays when her spirit pushed her toward presence. But she chose productivity. All the times, she felt the call to simply sit with him and be there, but thought washing dishes was more urgent. Profound lesson. The chosen often sin, not by doing wrong, but by doing the less important. You're not betraying your calling when you commit great sins. You're betraying it when you choose the urgent instead of the essential. When you choose tasks instead of people. When your to-do list becomes more important than the Holy Spirit's impulses. Martha working in the kitchen wasn't sinning, but she was missing Jesus, and Helena washing dishes wasn't sinning, but she was missing Antonio, and you answering emails when your child wants to talk isn't sinning, but you're missing windows of eternity that don't return. Helena was 58 when her daughter Clara died in a car accident. Clara was only 29. 2 weeks before the accident, Helena had a dream. Clara was on a dark road, alone, asking for help with a desperate voice. Helena woke with her heart racing, sweating, with that absolute certainty, the chosen no. It wasn't an ordinary nightmare. It was prophetic warning. The next morning, she called Clara and asked if everything was okay, if she was driving carefully, if anything was wrong. Clara laughed on the other end of the line, saying her mother needed to stop with those spiritual paranoias. But Helena felt the impulse. Strong, clear, undeniable. The same impulse she felt before Daniel died. Go there. Visit her personally. Spend the weekend with her. Something isn't right and you need to be present. But Helena had a church retreat that weekend. Important retreat, with outside preachers, about intercession and spiritual warfare. She was one of the organizing leaders. She couldn't miss it. So she didn't go. And 2 weeks later, Clara crashed her car coming home from work. Truck invaded the lane. Instant death. Heartbreaking lesson. You can be so busy with God's work that you miss what God is actually asking. This is perhaps the cruelest trap for the chosen. You get so involved in ministries, cells, church events, Bible studies, spiritual retreats, that you ignore the Spirit's specific impulses about the people God placed directly in your life. Helena was at a retreat about intercession while her daughter, whom God had placed on her heart through prophetic dream, was dying alone on a road. She was praying for strangers while ignoring the specific call to her own family. The chosen need to understand. Religious activism can be escape from real obedience. It's easier to go to a retreat than to have that difficult conversation. It's more comfortable to organize a church event than to cancel everything and simply be present when God is commanding. It's less risky to pray for crowds than to obey that specific impulse that will cost you comfort, agenda, or reputation. Your gifts aren't for you to appear spiritual. They're for you to obey specifically. When God gives you a dream about a person, obedience is going to that person. When you wake at 3 a.m. with someone on your heart, obedience is praying and then contacting them. When you feel that tightness to cancel everything and be present, obedience is canceling everything. Your gifts are divine commands disguised as sensations, and treating them as optional suggestions is spiritual rebellion. And even after Clara, even after Daniel, even after all these devastating losses and painful lessons, Helena still stumbled. In the last years with Antonio, she confessed to me that she still grabbed her phone when he was talking, still sighed when he repeated the same story for the 5th time. Still thought, tomorrow I'll pay more attention. Tomorrow I'll be more present. Because here's the hardest truth of all, the one nobody wants to hear. The chosen don't automatically stop failing just because they suffered. You need to choose to use your gifts consciously, every day, again and again and again. There's no spiritual graduation where you learn the lesson once, and that's it. Watching and praying isn't a one-time event. It's constant discipline. It's when you're tired and that impulse comes. It's when you're busy and that warning hits. It's when you've already obeyed 1,000 times and need to obey for the 1,001st time. Helena taught me the concept that changed my life. Remember and return. You will forget. You'll return to ignoring the signs. You'll normalize your gifts again. You'll start explaining rationally what is spiritual. But when you realize you forgot, don't stay paralyzed in guilt. Return to obedience. Use the gift again. Act on the impulse again, not perfectly, but persistently. Helena's final lesson. Holiness for the chosen isn't never stumbling, it's rising quickly. Proverbs 24:16 says the righteous falls 7 times and rises. The chosen aren't those who never fail. They're those who, when they realize they failed, immediately return to the position of obedience. Ignored an impulse today? Don't spend 3 days in guilt. Return now. Call now. Act now. Forgot to pray when you woke at 3 a.m.? Don't wait until tomorrow. Pray now, in the middle of the day if necessary. Didn't visit someone who was heavy on your heart? Don't wait until next week. Go today. The difference between chosen who change the world and chosen who waste their gifts isn't in perfection, it's in the speed of return. Helena looked at me at that retreat with her 89 years and said something I engraved in my heart. She had lived 32,485 days up to that moment, and she could count on her fingers the days when she had used her gifts completely. The days when she woke at 3 a.m. and really prayed until she felt complete release. The days when she had an impulse and simply obeyed without questioning. The days when she felt that tightness and canceled everything to be where God was commanding her to be. Her real regret wasn't not having traveled more, not having earned more money, not having accomplished more personal dreams. Her regret was having slept through most of her own spiritual life. God had given her eyes to see beyond the veil, and she spent entire days blind. Had given her ears to hear divine whispers, and she lived voluntarily deaf. Had given her sensitivity to perceive the invisible, and she chose the numbness of routine. And then she told me the words, "I can't get out of my head." Later never comes for the chosen. Because you know when it's time. You feel when time is running out. You have the warnings others don't have, so when you ignore them, it's not ignorance, it's conscious rebellion. For you who have prophetic dreams and ignore them, it's not forgetfulness, it's rebellion. For you who wake at 3 a.m. with someone on your heart and go back to sleep, it's not tiredness, it's rebellion. For you who feel the impulse to forgive, to call, to hug, to be present and postpone it, it's not lack of time, it's rebellion, because you were marked to know better. You carry gifts most don't have, and to whom much was given, much will be required. Helena ended our conversation holding my hands with surprising strength for her age, and asked me something specific. If I had the chance to tell her story, to tell the chosen to stop reading and act immediately. So this is what I'm doing now. Stop. You who are hearing this and recognize the signs in yourself. You who wake at dawn. You who have dreams that become reality. You who feel things before they happen. You whom animals love. You whom people seek without understanding why. You who experience those moments of absolute certainty. You are chosen. And with this marking comes proportional responsibility. Who is on your heart at this exact moment? Not tomorrow. Now. Stop everything you're doing and make contact. Call. Send a message. Go there if necessary. What has your spirit been nudging you to do for days? Not next week. Now. That difficult conversation. That request for forgiveness. That necessary change. Who do you need to hug? Not when it's convenient. Now. Your parents, if they're still alive. Your children, if they're still around. That friend you've been postponing seeing. What word needs to be said? Not when you're ready. Now. That I love you. That forgive me. That thank you you've been holding for months. James 4:17 leaves no room for negotiation. Anyone who knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it sins. You know. Your gifts tell you. Your spirit warns you. Your sensations guide you. So do it now, not later. Not when it's more convenient. Not when you feel more prepared. Now. Because Helena was right about one absolute thing. Later never comes. And for you, marked as chosen, who carry the ability to know when time is running out, there's no valid excuse to procrastinate obedience. Helena died 6 months after that retreat. 89.5 years old, and her last words to me were these: "Don't let the chosen make my mistake. Tell them that having the gifts isn't a privilege to feel special. It's a mission that requires constant action, and missions don't wait. Missions happen or are lost. So here I am, fulfilling the mission Helena gave me. If you recognize the signs in you, understand completely. You're not special in the sense of superior to others. You're responsible in the sense of doubled accountability. God gave you eyes that see beyond the visible, ears that hear the inaudible, heart that feels the imperceptible. Not for you to boast or feel different, but for you to act differently. Use your gifts today, now, this moment. Not perfectly. Nobody uses them perfectly, but persistently. And when you fail, because you will fail, remember and return. Don't lose 3 days in guilt. Realize you ignored an impulse and immediately return to the position of obedience. Because Helena's story teaches us this: later is an illusion. Tomorrow is a promise nobody can make. And for you, chosen, who have the ability to know this in the spirit before the brain understands, there's no excuse that holds up before God. So stop listening to me. Stop reading. Stop watching. And go do exactly what your spirit has been screaming for you to do since you started hearing this story. Now, if this story touched you, comment "chosen" below. And more importantly, tell me in the comments, what specific action are you going to take now after hearing Helena's story? Don't tell me tomorrow. Tell me after you've already acted.